calling, like the calling to pass knowledge on to your viewers?
The reason why like it excites me so much is it has something to do with connecting with people. It's just connecting with people. It's having a voice. It's being able to teach people, connect with people. There's definitely some aspect of like it goes back to that wanting of having a voice, but wanting to be heard, wanting to feel needed. Something about like reinforcing the fact that you're like a valuable human being to the world. It's some type of psychology for that for me. It's something along those lines. If you were to like psychoanalyze it, it's like rewarding. But I don't think it's like a clout. I don't think it's necessarily like a ego clout thing. I think it's more from like it's just an innate sense of it's a built-in human, a basic human desire to want to feel like you have a voice, like feel that people want to listen to what you have to say. Sure, that makes sense.
Yes, it does. And from your perspective, who are you listening to?
Who am I listening to?
Yes. Whose voices are you listening to before you figure out you want your voice to be heard?
Well, I'm listening to a lot of different voices. I'm always reading at least 2 or 3 books. I'm listening to what I am telling myself in my reflection periods every day, in my meditations. I'm not sure if you're like insinuating if there's someone that's like pushing me down this angle.
No, I'm just...
maybe subconsciously.
It's a non-judgmental question.
Yeah, no, I don't think that. Who am I listening to? I'm listening to a variety of people. I mean, I listen to a few different podcasts. I read different books. I've been wanting to make content for a while, but everything in life happens for a reason. I sold my last law firm. I stopped doing my other business, which about my other businesses that you've helped me with those. There was like a lull in that business for a while, and it allowed me to go offline, and now I'm here and I have this amazing resource, and I'm just connecting with people. The thing that really gets me is the connecting with it. Do you remember the movie A League of Their Own?
I'm not a big movie watcher.
Okay, so A League of Their Own was like a really classic movie where Kevin Costner was like a baseball coach.
Okay.
And it's a great movie. I need to go back and see it. But the line of the movie is, if you build it, they will come. And it's a famous line. That line might even register. And the great baseball players start coming out of like left field. And the idea is that like, if you work your ass off and you build something great, then things will happen. But until you do that, it's all talk. So I kind of like, I need to build something and like prove to not only the world, but to myself that it's important. And then, I can start taking actions.
So your monetization strategy on this business is way out in the future.
Way out. Ultra long term.
So it's like initial investment. You've got the capital involved in here, the costs associated with running this, but it's almost like it's a long-term payoff, which will take quite a bit of investment, both in terms of time, money, relationships, until you figure out a true monetization strategy.
Correct.
Fascinating.
But there's we need to, you guys started recording? We're not going to. Okay. This is really good content. This is the kind of stuff that's amazing. And by the way, you interviewing me would be amazing too. You could grill me all day long. I love it when you grill me. But wait,
just start rolling.
But wait, I just want to kind of finish that one train of thought. We can go back because I want to introduce you. There's an amazing quote, and it's from and I might butcher it, but it's from Alex Hormozy. He's like a new up and coming guy, super sharp guy. He owns acquisition.com, and he basically takes companies from like 5 to 10 million to 50 to 100, and he's worth a couple $100 million already, and he's just crushing it. But he just started making content, so I've been following him. Anyway, the quote is something along the lines of, if you can never wait for money, then you'll never have any money. And if you have the patience to wait for money for a little bit of time, you can create a little bit of wealth. And if you have enough patience so that you never need any money, then you'll have as much money as you ever wanted. And I butchered it, but I think the point across, which is like, if you're always in need of money, you'll never have it. If you can wait a little bit, you can get a decent amount of money. And if you can wait forever, you could have unlimited. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. So anyway.
Go ahead.
Do you need to go to the bathroom?
No.
Or anything? Good. Okay, I think I'm good too.
So this is not just a headshot, it's a full body shot when you're
that's the
bigger angle like that.
Okay. So it is a full body shot.
It's kind of like it doesn't show your feet, it shows your legs.
Yeah, but pretty well. Yeah. I was just curious. Like some they come really close, some go for
Sometimes the editors.
You can also alter the zoom in post-production. So I'm learning a ton about this stuff.
Oh, that's very cool.
Yeah, you can alter the zoom in post-production. You lose a little bit of the resolution, but you can alter the.
You're really studying to.
Well, I'm a tech guy. We've never really talked super tech, but I get very like.
Yeah, no.
I love learning about like technology and stuff.
Fire away.
All right, so you get
To the wide angle. Okay. You're gonna restart it, or we're rolling for the. Yeah, that's perfect. Let me just
know what I'm going to do is I'm just going to stick the phone that doesn't come up there. Okay, perfect.
Yeah, I'm putting my phone over here so I don't feel it buzzes. So we're good? Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Miami Lawyer Daddy podcast. I am very excited tonight to have a dear friend on the podcast. He's been a mentor to me for a few years. And he's like I said, he's a dear friend. He's an extremely successful man. He's a proud grandfather, a family man, wonderfully, exceptionally successful entrepreneur. He's been through it all. He's been all over the world. And I'm just very honored to have Rudy Karsan tonight with us on the podcast.
Thanks for having me, man.
Thank you so much for coming down. We actually planned this yesterday, which is not normal for you because you're a very busy man, aren't you?
Well, I appreciate coming. I appreciate being here. Friendships are really important to me because friends are chosen family. And there are certain people around whom I get this neurochemical reaction. It's a feeling of warmth. It's a feeling of camaraderie. It's a feeling of just kind of being there. And I don't have another word to describe it, but love. There's this warm feeling. And when I'm with you, I experience that. So if you say, really come on down.
Amazing.
It's like, okay.
It's the best. We've had the most recent time we sat down, I think it was the most recent time, I was really struggling and we met at a Starbucks and we did like almost 2 full hours offline, full focus. And that was a formidable experience for me. And my life's been a lot better since then. But that was a really, all-in experience that I was extremely grateful for. So now we're sitting here together 6 months later, and we're in the beautiful studio, and I'm super excited to have you on. We talked briefly before, but I want to kind of go through and start on some of the lighter stuff and then kind of work our way towards the heavier stuff.
You're the boss, man.
So if people don't know about Rudy, Rudy has been all over the world. He's been obsessed with business and finance, but now really his specialty is people, which I love because that's what I pride myself on too. And I think that's why we become such good friends, and we just love talking about, you know, management and why is this person, you know, we've dealt with a lot of difficult personalities together in some of the stuff that we've been through in the last few years, and we've loved talking about that. But I want to go back to kind of giving the perspective of what most people would think is like your biggest achievement, like, you know, on paper and the world would see, and then kind of go from there. So in 2012, you sold your company Connexa to IBM, right? Was that the right?
Correct. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just briefly explain, you know, the exit, and, you know, if you can, whatever numbers you're comfortable giving out, just for context for the viewers and everybody.
Yeah. So let me just give you a little bit of context. I was born in Kenya.
Right.
Initially we were refugees. Went to England because my family members were their uncles and aunts, and then ended up in Canada. And then I moved stateside in the late 80s and moved to Philadelphia. And I'd had a history of kind of building companies, and starting companies, not building companies, starting companies. And in a lot of cases, it was an abject failure. So I've been insolvent or bankrupt 3 times in my life. In the early 2000s, Connexa was born. It involved stripping off a lot of the older entities or other business lines that we had. And then it was kind of the right product at the right time. So when you're building businesses, the one thing that I've learned is you can't fight the environment. You have to kind of ride the waves. And when it gets really choppy, go to a safe harbor. Do not try and fight the waves. And I just happened to be in a place where we caught a tailwind of about 10, 12 years and started from nothing. And we ended up taking the company public and selling it to IBM. And so at that point in time, I think it was the second largest application software purchase that IBM made. It was $1.3 billion.
Okay.
And from then on out, I mean, I still do a lot of work in the business community, but I moved from being an operator more to sort of an advisor, investor, and quasi-operator. So that journey was, 10, 12 years. It was really a fun journey. What was really interesting is one of my bankruptcies happened in 2003 when our largest customer went under. This was just a post internet boom of 2001.
Okay.
And we managed to navigate through this, and 2 years later, I ended up taking the company public. So it just goes to show you how quickly fortunes can change.
Wow. So that was the same
company,
same entity.
Same entity.
Oh, wow.
We were able to navigate it without any infusion of cash. Salaries were suspended. People that left.
That's an incredible. I did not know that. I did research on your background because we a lot of our experience together is friendship, and we don't go through ticky-tack stuff of bankruptcies in the past. But that's an interesting one. I want to get into that. But the reason that I wanted to start kind of at the end of that story is because in my research, I watched your TED Talk or your mini TED Talk, whatever it was, and you talked about how the sale and this huge liquidation cash out event for you was the saddest day of your life. And most people, think, oh my God, he got 50, 100, 200 million, like poor him, how sad. But I actually completely understood in a sense, I understood where you were coming from when you said that, but I want to hear more about that because I've been thinking a lot about like life and fulfillment lately as a father. And that's a good place to start because you work your ass off for so many years and you think that the cash out event is what you've been looking for. And then you get there and you're like crushed. So talk to me a little bit about how much you learned from that process.
The only time in my life that I've actually gone to sleep crying, physically crying 21 days in a row was post the close of the IBM deal. It's, if you haven't experienced it, what I'm speaking about makes no sense because, as you put it, the entrepreneur's dream, in those days, the phrase unicorn
Right.
wasn't yet invented. $1 billion deals were rare because I was on the front pages of Financial Times, a lot of the other business magazines. So let me take the story back a little bit, right? Clearly, I'm a minority. And when I moved to Canada, there was a high degree of racism towards people of Indian heritage. They were referred to as Pakis.
Okay.
And then I moved to the U.S., which has its own history of racism, but it's very open to non-African Americans. So we won't go down that path, but it was like a refreshing awakening when I moved to the States. And I had 3 goals at that point in time. One was I wanted to create a $1 billion entity. 2, I wanted to be worth in the 9 digits. And 3, I wanted to have a business that changed humanity in a way that I thought was positive, which doesn't mean it's positive. It just means what I think is positive, right? And so Connexa was founded on the basis of serving humanity because engagement at work has a spillover effect in your life. So if you're engaged at work, you're then engaged at home and basically become a better member of your community, a better parent, a better spouse, et cetera, et cetera. And that engagement component, when Connexa was started, was only measured in less than 10% of Fortune 500 companies. By the time we sold to IBM, 65% of Fortune 500 companies said it as part of their dashboard. And it had become a meaningful part of the way the businesses operated. They were moving from treating people as commodities to appreciating the engagement at work. So that goal was achieved. I hit the $1 billion goal, and then I had a net worth in the 9 digits. I really lost all reason to live. And the biggest lesson I learned there is having goals that don't have a depth as to why you're doing it creates a level of emptiness inside you that is extremely painful. It is truly a death, and you don't even know why you're crying. And until you get to the core of your being and say, here is why I had that goal and what it meant to me, and that I celebrate the end, you find a lot of sadness because you reach a point and you are literally rudderless. Like there's no other way to describe it. You feel like really empty inside, and you feel like a fake, and everyone's congratulating you, and you get it like you don't get it. Like, I'm really unhappy. I'm really sad. I don't even know.
You can't even tell people because they'll
not
just
allowed
laugh at you almost. They'll
Right.
think
You're not allowed
joking,
to be
right?
sad. You're
Right.
not allowed to be sad.
Because you
Like,
just
how can you be
the whole
sad?
world thinks you're like
And
on the victory stage.
yeah, and even I think the only person that really understood that was Sharon, my wife, because she had been through that journey with me. I think was probably the only person who really understood how I felt. And to this day, I still have trouble articulating it in a manner that makes sense because it's still so nebulous and almost wispy. Like it feels like a cloud. It's so difficult to express that level of. The only word I can use is sadness. You get enveloped with it and you don't know why.
I would suspect in a weird way, correct me if I'm wrong, it's almost like the bigger the goal was, the worse the sadness is because the whole world now, like it's like no one can doubt that you're like a king of industry. You've accomplished. How could you possibly be unhappy? No one could doubt it. And again, you're right. It's almost hard to put into words, but it almost magnifies it. The more your achievement is just from a objective outsider's view, it just seems like it almost makes it harder because it just pushes you further and further into this area where like no one will ever understand. I don't know if that's kind of as an outsider.
I would say there is some legitimacy to that because since then I've been involved in the building of 2 more unicorns where I didn't get there. I wasn't the founder, but I got there well before they hit $1 million in revenues. And I felt no sadness. I mean, it was more like a business. I wasn't the founder. I was involved fairly heavily as the advisor / strategy guy / operator, but it didn't have the inside of my being invested in the business. So having had other levels of what the world would call success, I would say that the point you're making is accurate. Like I never wanted to win the Heisman Trophy because your biggest day is when you are 20 years old.
Right.
The rest of your life is downhill from here.
Okay.
So I never wanted to win the Heisman. But it's a really sad moment.
But something else you said that really registered with me was you set these goals, and then when you achieve these goals, you say, I forget exactly what you said, but what I heard was something like, I set these goals that are like financial related and now I've hit them and I feel like a fraud or a fake because money doesn't matter that much. And I spent all these years just chasing a 9-figure payout. And now who am I? That's kind of what I heard. I don't know if that's.
Yeah, it's not so much. Yeah, there's not so much of the fraud element, but it's the element of how do I self-validate myself? There's 2 kinds of validation from others and validation from self, right?
Right.
What's my self-validation going to be? Like, I think a majority of people want to be beautiful human beings, right? And most people are beautiful human beings. And we forget that that's the essence of our being.
Right.
The essence of our being isn't being the king of the hill. So let me share something with you. When you're king of the hill, it's a really unhappy place to be in because it's a place where you're constantly on guard. you really have no friends, and everyone's trying to knock you off that hill. So you're filled, and I've been there, I know what it's like. It's beyond a lonely place. It's a dangerous place. It's an unhappy place. It's a place where you get stripped of your own humanity. And so you strive to get to the top of the hill, then you're the king of the hill, and someone's always there wanting to take you down. And it's really, really goddamn lonely there. And it's scary, and it's kind of not the way I want to lead my life.
And I think that's a beautiful way to say it. And are you saying that because that's when you like achieve a goal or a series of big goals, that's what you feel like? You feel like you're the king of the hill.
You're at the top of the mountain, right?
Right. And there's only it's either the status quo or dethrone.
Yeah, dethrone.
Yeah.
You get killed or
you grind a day just to maintain.
Yeah, and then you'll die there.
Right.
So anytime you're on a journey, if you don't see other hills or other mountains or other peaks, it's either an illusion or get ready to die there.
Right.
There is no such thing as a peak, because there is always another one. And when you think you're there and there isn't another one.
Now, I completely agree with that. And I had my own like mini version, just for context. As a young lawyer, I'm like, I always knew I wanted to be on my own. You're an entrepreneur. Like the idea of just showing up somewhere and being told what to do all day, a part of you is dead for me.
I'm just curious, why did you minimize it by saying a mini version?
Well, just less, the dollars are less.
And by whose measure?
Just mathematics.
Okay, I'm just curious.
Yeah.
Why you create that self-denigration?
No, it's just I was younger, and
now you're making excuses.
No, but I'm giving you the honest explanation of why I referred to it as like my miniature version of you. Because when you had this, you're like 20 years older.
Right.
So it was kind of like it's really not fair to call it miniature. You're right. Yeah, it's like life is like a series of hills, right? And for that, I was the king on my hill at the time, and it didn't feel like a miniature. You're right. So let me rephrase. I had my own version of what you went through. I was a young lawyer. I had my own firm, never had more than $25,000 to my name. I'd go between 20 to 0, back up. I'd settle a case. I'd been out for 3 or 4 years. And then finally, I think I settled the case for like almost $1 million, and I had, $500,000 in my account or something like that. And I was just like, I'm not like, I thought this was going to be the happiest day of my life. And I'm like, all it is just like a lot of digits in my account, and I'm just the same guy. And it was just like a really awakening experience for me. I was probably 29, 28, something like that. And it was just, so that's my context about why when you said that, I was like, I was expecting him to say that up on that TED stage. Like, I know what that is like. And I want to get into some of the stuff that you start doing, which is like, oh, I'm like, well, I can afford Rolexes now, or I can afford a really cool Tesla now. So maybe that's why, maybe I won't feel sad about having all this money if I start spending it now that I'm rich. I need to act like I'm rich. So you went through that phase too, didn't you?
Oh yeah, big time.
And was that, looking back on it now, was that phase before the cash out for you, during, after?
Late, during, and then after.
So like when you saw the cash out coming, you started?
Well, I was also making a lot of money by that point in time. I was getting paid significantly. And I'll just share this story with you. So we lived in the suburbs of Philadelphia. It was it was a nice house. It is a nice house because it still stands. It was big. We had 2 kids. It was the party house for both my children's friends, so it was always populated with people. We had lots of visitors. There was a time we once had over 200 people sleeping overnight in our place. So
Oh my
it was
God,
like,
that's amazing.
It was a nice place. Okay? And then I loved cars, so I used to race cars. The radicals, you do that in Nevada, where you kind of like the mini F5s or F1s, pardon me. And so I had a Ferrari 458, and then I was with a 17-year-old who was the son of my cousin, and we went and bought an Aventador, and then we went and checked out a McLaren, and I was going to build a garage, and then the garage would come up and say, okay, what car do I want to drive? I had it all planned out. On the way home from the dealer, I had a soft tire, and the Ferrari dealership was less than 2 miles, about a mile from my place, and I'd been dealing with them for a while. So they all had my garage door opener. I just dropped the car off. My wife comes and picks me up, and we're driving home, and she says, what would happen if this happened to the Lamborghini, or what happened if it happened to McLaren? I said, I mean, that's easy. You just flatbed it and they would fix it and life would continue. But that hit me like a ton of bricks. Like it just went to like, what the hell am I doing? Because the more stuff you own, the more the stuff owns you.
So true.
And I want to say it was less than 4 weeks after that incident where my wife and I sat down and we went through a massive downsizing. We sold our second homes. We got rid of all, I don't own a car right now. If you come to my place, there's no artwork. It's a nice condo. It's a fairly large condo, but it's very simply decorated. Everything I own is in my office, and if you come in there, it's mostly empty space with a couple of sound buffers so that when I'm on video calls or what have you, there's no feedback. And I literally, other than the clothes on my back, I own nothing else. We got rid of everything. Like, when I say everything, we don't even have a parking spot in our condo garage. We don't even own a car. We own nothing.
Fascinating.
Right. I had a bunch of watches. I only have this one watch now. I've got a second watch. It was given to me as a gift by a friend that passed away because he entrusted his company to me. He had cancer and he was dying. So I ended up kind of selling the company for him on his behalf on his deathbed or what have you. And he made a gift of a really nice watch to me. So I keep that in my safe from a memento perspective. But literally, I think the most expensive thing I own right now is probably this watch that I paid like $6,000 for.
Now, which is funny because I know you've gifted more expensive things to people.
Yes.
But was there anything that happened besides that like anecdotal story? Was there like a life event that happened or something else that you could look back and say, what made you realize that you were going down a very slippery slope?
So the kid that was with me was the poster boy. Are you familiar with the name Terry Fox?
Mm-mm.
So Terry Fox had osteocarcinoma, which was bone cancer. He was in Canada.
Go ahead.
He had osteocarcinoma, bone cancer, and he ran on a peg leg and a normal leg from one coast of Canada to the other.
Okay.
and halfway in his journey, he died. So he was doing it for cancer awareness.
Okay.
So his name in Canada is very famous. He's known as Terry Fox, and there's a whole highway dedicated to him in the middle part of the country in Alberta, which is just kind of north of the Midwest. And every year, the Terry Fox Foundation names somebody who embodies the spirit of Terry Fox that is suffering from osteocarcinoma and in the quality that they spend their lives. In 2013, the nominee for that was my 17-year-old cousin's son.
Oh, wow.
Who loved cars and would come to Philly with me. And obviously he passed away shortly thereafter.
Right.
And so his name was Yusuf. And so Yusuf, I spent a lot of time with him. He was, much younger than me, obviously. And I loved that kid. And I think at that point in time, when he passed away, I wasn't sad. I was sad for his parents.
Right.
I missed him because I spent a lot of time with him. But it really solidified in my mind that this insatiable pursuit of material things is a fool's errand.
So something about you being close to death made you realize that it was that you were spending too much of your life force on stuff that was really inconsequential.
Right. So the word death implies the end.
Right.
To me, in most contexts, right? To me, death is not the end. It's a transition point.
Right.
So the death of Connexo, the death of my goals was a transition point to another life or a rebirth, or whatever you want to call it. The death of me as an individual is a transition for my soul to move on. But I think it's a combination of seeing that transition and really becoming aware of the fact that the more you own, the more you are beholden to what you own. And if you really think about the amount of stress in your life because you want to safeguard your possessions or look after your possessions or care for your possessions, it's very taxing. It's exceptionally liberating when you own nothing. Like, you literally don't think of anything. I mean, visualize a life where it doesn't even cross your mind. I don't have to take care of anything.
Right when you were describing it, I was thinking, my next question was going to be, so after that, how free did you feel?
It's like, I can't even describe the sense of lightness because, look, Brent, you went through a medical situation that created a life for you, which I think is much healthier and probably happier than the life you had before. You still have that chronic pain, which is a reminder to not carry heavy baggage. And the way you view that heavy baggage is in physical fitness and in extra fat, and then you've got your dietary requirements that you follow. How much lighter are you now?
Oh, well, spiritually, emotionally, and then poundage wise, it's night and day.
That's it. It is the shedding of unnecessary baggage that gives you both the lightness of being as well as the lightness of living.
Yeah, well said. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I still struggle with the pursuit of material goods, but I'm very aware of the slippery slope that they present. So I've had like momentary or temporary purges. Like I was collecting watches for a while, and then all of a sudden I was like, I'm selling all my watches, and I'm using the funds for like stuff that's of higher and better use. So it wasn't like necessarily a purge in the sense of I don't want to own anything, because I think that when you own too many things, the things that you own you. But maybe I was a little bit on the right track. So
yeah, and it's very addictive, right?
Oh.
So I'll give you a anecdote associated with it. After my friend passed away, he bequeathed this watch to me. It's a really nice watch. It's a Roger DeWee or something. It's
Right.
glow in the dark.
Oh, you've shown it to me before.
Yeah,
It's beautiful.
Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful piece of
Right. Yeah.
It doesn't have the brand, but it's beautiful. Okay. One of my closest friends in life is getting married. He's half my age, so he's like in his early 30s. Okay. He lost his dad when he was 16. His dad was murdered in a bar on his 16th birthday, and he carried a lot of anger and guilt about it because he was supposed to be with his father that evening, and he wanted to be with his friends. So he told his dad, I'm going with my friends.
Oh, wow.
So his dad went to the bar. He was stopping the fight, murdered. The murderer runs away, leaves the country, never brought to justice, that kind of a thing. So he's carrying a lot of anger with him.
Yeah.
And over the years, we've become really close. We're in a lot of our businesses, we're together. And he's younger than my kids, right? But we're really close. And so he's getting married. I'm speaking at his wedding, and I want to surprise him. So I'm asking around, and because of our relationship, I know basically what it is. Finally, I find him the perfect Patek Philippe watch. Okay. So I gave him his gift, and in that journey, I saw another watch that I really liked. I actually ordered it. And then I'm going, what the hell are you doing? It's such a slippery slope. And then I canceled the order, right? Because the person who sold me the watch.
That's so funny that you sold that you brought that story up. Okay, so again, this is a story. This is like an ancient tale, and I don't have the references, but someone will know it, and I'll find it and I'll pull it up for you. And I think I've actually told you this before, but it makes so much sense. So there was an ancient craftsman in history, and he was making his stuff and whatever, and he made something for the queen. And so the queen, and he was just getting by. But he made one of his things for the queen, and the queen was so happy with it that she sent him like the finest rug in all the lands. And then he looked around his apartment and he's like, well, I have this beautiful rug, and now my sheets on my bed don't match. They're not high quality enough. So I need to go and I need to upgrade my sheets. And then it basically set off this whole tale where he became like a spendaholic, and it just spiraled out of control. And then eventually, I don't know, he wound up killing himself or something crazy, but he just had one like material good. It's like one sip of alcohol for an addict or something. And then it just spirals into like this disorder that it's just wild. It's some human condition thing that we just can't seem to get it in check.
Yeah. And it's, like I've done a bunch of talks, and I've spoken in terms of many audiences. And one of the questions I get asked a lot is, do you have to own a Ferrari to not want a Ferrari? And initially my answer has always been yes, right? You have to experience it as you go along your journey. I'm not so sure the answer is yes after the years have passed by. I think there is something about the human condition that the addiction of materialism is very pervasive, And it might be the worst addiction of all.
And it might be because it's not an addiction to material goods, and it's an addiction to validation.
Yes.
Might be. I'm not saying it is.
Right. No, I agree
Might
with you.
be.
I mean, we can sit here and philosophize on it, but there is definitely a malaise in this country, if not in the world, that is really becoming top of mind, and that's loneliness.
Mm.
And it was, I was having a discussion with a friend, and my argument was that the primary cause of loneliness are dogs. And he's a dog owner, and he goes, "What are you talking about, Rudy?" I said, "Well, you own a dog, right?"
I do.
Okay, so you do own
I
a
do,
dog.
yeah.
Okay. How many dogs do you own?
We own one.
Do you love the dog?
I love the dog.
The dog loves you unconditionally.
Unconditionally. The best.
And on a bad day, you go to the dog makes you feel good.
My wife more so than me, but
Okay. So your wife is more connected to the dog than you are.
the reason we have the dog is my wife. I said no, but eventually I said happy wife, happy life.
So she has a dog.
Right.
Now watch her behavior, okay? The two of you have a disagreement. Where does she go for solace?
Sometimes the dog.
Having relationships with human beings is messy. And every time she goes to the dog for relief, that's one less encounter with you, which is then adding to her loneliness. And you start building up on that over the years.
Well, I think there's some truth to it. And then, there's a lot of talk now about these women who were fed the feminism stuff over the last 20 years. And so they were just worried about their paychecks, and they were at home with their cats, as so the sayings go. And now they're 45, 50. And a lot of them are like, don't fall for the cup of shit that I was fed, because now I'm 50 and I have no kids, and it's just me and my cats. And every day that goes by, I'm getting a little bit closer to realizing that I'm just fucking lonely, and I have another 30 years on this planet, and I don't see it being a good 30 years. So that's what's out there, and there's just definitely some truth to it. Some people are saying it.
So if you have a dog that you love,
Right.
because very few people have dogs they don't love,
Right.
ask yourself a simple question. Every time you're showing love to the dog or collecting love from the dog, what human are you depriving of from your presence, and how much is that creating to your loneliness?
Interesting. I never thought about it like that, but I mean, it's a very interesting way.
If you look at, I mean, right now, I think, I'm not sure of this data point, but in the top 60% of the socioeconomic class we have spends more on their dog than the bottom third spends on their children.
It's unbelievable.
It's just unbelievable.
I don't know. I'm biased. Obviously, I've had a dog, and we've had a great dog, and having one dog that an entire family shares feels like maybe an acceptable like equilibrium, because everyone just gets to be with the dog a little bit. It's not like the effect you're talking about is sliced by 5 or 6 people in the household, and they just get to snuggle with the dog. If they're a young kid, they get to sleep in the bed, which is really no humans being deprived of anything in that process. But it is still very interesting. I mean, yes, it's definitely a crutch to, oh, well, I don't have to go out. If I'm single, for example, and I have a dog, I'll just go home and snuggle with my dog, and I'll just go on living single. Well, if you do that too many times, you might be single forever. And then it's funny that we're landing at this topic, because my next big area that I wanted to go with you was literally, well, it's a kind of a hybrid area. It's, what makes a good life, but we're going to go there later. But Do you think now, because you're how old?
I'll be 67.
Okay, so you're at like the perfect age because you're not so old that, you know, people are going to write you off as like a grumpy old man who's just on his way, and you're not young enough to like you're well past your child. I mean, as a man, you could still be childbearing, but you've done that. You're already a grandpa, so you're at a great age where like what you say can be really taken seriously. Do you think that you can have a truly fulfilled life and forego having children? And giving a binary answer to that is maybe not necessarily fair because a lot of people can't have children. But I guess a better way maybe to approach it is if you are a perfectly healthy, you know, young person and have great genetics and you're just great, but you make the decision to just not have kids because you think, I mean, there's a variety of things you might tell yourself as to why, but if you just don't manage to have kids, do you think it's something that is going to be extremely regretful later in your life?
So a lot of my job is, and a lot of my time is spent with people significantly younger than myself, right? So most of the people that I spend 70, 80% of my day with are in their 20s and 30s because they're entrepreneurs kind of building companies,
right,
or they're working on certain projects that I find of interest. So a vast majority of my day is spent with fairly young people. I've had just this year alone 7 conversations with people in their early 30s. I've been invited to 2 weddings, and on both those weddings, in sidebar conversations, in one case the bride, in one case the groom said they weren't going to have kids, right? And the way I look at it is as follows. If I get away from the scriptures, which is whether you're part of the Abrahamic traditions of either being a Muslim or a Jew or a Christian, that there's that one body of thought that is very consistent around childbearing, or the other wisdom traditions that precede the Abrahamic traditions, whether it's Hinduism or Buddhism or Taoism in the Asian part of the world. There's this notion of child creation, of having children as fulfilling your destiny. I think it's a little deeper than that, because there is a part of our system inbred in what we refer to as the reptilian brain that has this need to procreate. And leaving that need unfulfilled will have consequences.
Right.
Now, I don't know what those consequences are. And this modern generation is the first time in humanity's history where we truly have a choice. There was a choice with the advent of birth control, but there was so much societal pressure then to have children.
That's what I thought you meant.
That
you just become totally ostracized. Like no one will take you seriously.
Correct.
Right.
So you're just
an outcast.
And you got to remember that this idea of us being lone wolves is really a false narrative.
Yeah.
Lone wolves are killed in the wilderness. We are social beings. We only survive through our tribe or our villages, are the people around us. Therefore, if you're making a conscious decision not to have kids, you will be part of a group of people around which no research has been done. Because no research has been done, you don't know what the unintended consequences are. Because you don't know what the unintended consequences are, you will then have to face your future in an unknown state because you just don't know. As long as you're aware and you're making that decision eyes wide open, that you're really on the vanguard of the species by making a very crucial choice that goes against the grain of the fundamental nature of your being, of all life forms, which the need to procreate exists in all life forms.
Right.
Then do so. But understand that more likely than not, there will be a cost. And that cost is unknown.
And it's also delayed. It's in the future, it's potentially way down the road.
It could be 20 years down the road. It could be 50 years down the road. As long as you're aware that there may or may not be the cost, and that cost is unknown. Like nobody knows
how great it could be.
Yeah. But there will be consequences. There's very little that happens in life without consequences. There will be consequences here.
So if someone comes to you and says, like, I need advice, I need mentorship on this topic, you're basically saying, really think about it before you decide not to do it.
I said two things. And to all those people, I said exactly the same thing. I said two things. Number one, an opinion or advice is like a navel. Everyone has one, and it's absolutely meaningless.
Right.
Go to people in their 70s and 80s who don't have children for whatever reason, and go interview them. And don't do it with one person, do it with 10 people. And see if there is data points
that can help
forms a pattern
right.
that can help your decision making.
Right.
That's kind of how I would approach it. If you've made a decision where no evidence exists, where conscious decisions were made, at least talk to people who didn't have the choice and find out what their lives are like.
Do you think if somebody did that, actually said, okay, I'm going to actually go and I'm going to talk to 10 people between the ages of 65 to 80, and I'm going to talk to them for an hour about this topic, as an actuary, do you think anybody would, if they did it and talked to all 10 people, do you think, how many of those people do you think would push them to have kids and not have kids?
Out of the people in that age group, which I'm now at the lower end of that age group,
right.
So I know people.
But you're not in it because you have kids.
I know, exactly. But I know
right.
people.
Okay, so you know some.
So I know some of these
right.
people, right? Brent, it's such a taboo subject. For that age group, there's so much shame associated with it.
So you're saying they might not give you good information.
Well, I'm not sure I can get the truth as Rudy. As a
25-year-old girl who just wants for truth. Advice, and they have social
connectivity. They might get the truth.
They might get the truth.
And I don't know what that truth is.
Yeah, because it's impossible for you to get that.
Right. And I think it's such a novel thought. Now, the question that comes to my mind is, that's a very unusual question. So give me the context as to why you asked that question.
About can you have a fulfilled life? So I'm a new father. My boys are 4 and 2. And I have a lot of, I'm trending more towards the point where all my friends are people with kids, because that's how it goes. Like that's how life works, right? You are friends with people in common. But I'm still young enough where a lot of my friends don't have kids. And when I became a father, and especially when I became like a multiple father, 2 boys, house, wife, family, I felt like I went through almost like a metamorphosis. Like I became a different species of human, where, especially as a man, for me, and I know a lot of other men, you're just a selfish being. What do I want to do? What's next for me? I want to work. I want to play. I want to wake up when I want to wake up. I want to play poker when I want to play poker, go to the gym. And you can do that, and you can get away with that for your entire life, especially if you don't have kids. And you can even get married to a certain extent and still be like a selfish man. But when it comes time to have kids, if you're not going to be like a deadbeat dad and you're going to really be a present father, your whole being changes. At least it did for me. And I just went through like a legitimate metamorphosis. And so as someone in your position who's now in their older years, but they have the family, they have the businesses, they've gone through so much, I was just curious what your take and the world, and it's just a very important topic right now in the world. And you hang out with a lot of young people because of your businesses, and you're exposed to a lot of, younger generation people. And those are kind of some of the people that are deciding, because they're so wrapped up in their work, and they're just like, how could I ever, like, especially founders, which are some of the most important people in our lifetimes. They're just amazing people with high intellect and high work ethics, and they would be amazing parents. And those are a lot of the people that are choosing not to have kids because they're so wrapped up in their businesses. I just thought it would be, a really good topic for you to enlighten me on, because you've probably, and I was right, you've talked to a lot of people who have come to you and asked you to help them figure that situation out. But yeah, it felt like I changed species when I became a father. And if we have a lot of men, especially, who are just not going to become fathers, then I personally just don't think it's a good thing.
So there is some research that shows that if a man doesn't become a father or doesn't have a partner, there is a very high probability that they go one of two ways. They become extremely violent, or they become extremely depressed. So there is some research that does show that.
Wow.
Because there is a level, before we started the podcast, we were discussing why you were doing the podcast.
Okay.
And you mentioned that need of having my voice heard.
Yep.
The need to spread your genetic pool far surpasses any need to have your voice heard. So think of it as 100x from that need you have to have your voice heard.
Right.
So the inability to meet that need can create significant amounts of trauma. And sometimes you don't even know of that need until it erupts into something. So I think people that do make that choice knowingly are rational beings, and those rational beings will then probably not go down one of these two paths. And I think there is going to be an epidemic in this country, because if you look at college attending members of the species, I think it's something like 54-46 now in favor of the female.
Yeah, it's been trending more every 2 or 3 years. It goes another % higher female.
And there is still social stigma for the female to get married to a lower earning male. So there is portion of society that will not find a mate.
Mm-hmm.
And that portion of society is going to be entering in periods of either significant violence or
significant depression. And it makes sense. I mean, at the basic level, it goes back to validation. Like, you have a core need as a human to be validated, or maybe that's not the best word, but you have to be brought in by your fellow humans. And if you want to be with a woman and you can't find a single woman on the planet to be with you, boy, that's a rough place to be. So you either act out in violence, or you just crawl into a dark hole. And
well, I'll share a personal story with you, right? When I was growing up, I was ostracized in school to the point where none of the kids in my class spoke to me for various reasons, okay, which I won't go into. All the way through my late single-digit years and early double-digit years, I was extremely lonely to the point when I hit adolescence, like when I was 13 and 14. I was absolutely convinced that I was never going to have kids or get married because
Never get a girlfriend.
never get a girlfriend.
Right.
And so I went deep into schooling, was where I put my energy in. And fortunately, I did well in school. So I started excelling in school and I became really good at it.
Right.
And then we left Kenya, went to England, and then came to Canada. And after, like, I just kind of conducted myself in a manner where I wasn't ever going to get married. So I'd become like, I was fairly, I mean, I've always been fairly boisterous and loud and to a certain extent obnoxious. Those were parts of my traits. They got magnified. And because I just didn't care because no one was ever going to pick me, right? And after about a year and a half, almost a year and a half in Canada, I was playing badminton, which is not a sport we play here in the US,
Right.
but it's played in Canada. So we were still immigrants. So, they would have these events to keep the kids off the street in the local universities and local colleges,
Right.
or whatever the case might be. And I met Shirin, and she fell in love with me. That was a feeling of complete liberation. Like it was, wow, that, I am capable of being loved.
That's amazing.
And like literally, I mean, we've been the best of friends. We've been together since we were 17. And it'll be 50 years next year where we've been the best of friends.
Congrats. That's amazing. But you did what you're supposed to do as a man. You went and you grinded and you improved your status. You became a great student. You started, you put your head down and you did some work.
Yeah.
And voila, didn't even take you that long. And you made yourself an attractive mate and you got your confidence up. You started excelling. And then boom, you got a girlfriend that you fell in love with. I mean, it just, it's great because it just shows what men should be doing. Like if you can't get a girlfriend, just improve yourself, right? I mean, it's easier said than done. It's hard work. You found out at an early age, if you let it slide till you're 33 and you're way overweight and you're a low earner and you dropped out of college, fuck, that hill is going to be a lot bigger than it was for you at 14, but it doesn't mean it's not climbable.
Yeah, I mean, I have no experience in that, so I can't comment on that. And like, quite honestly, I don't even have a view on it. There are not too many people in my life right now that fits that profile. So I haven't had a chance to really think about it.
Yeah.
Know those people. So they're not in people I connect with on a regular basis. So.
No, but I mean, it's, I didn't know that. I guess maybe you did tell me that Sharon was your like high school sweetheart or whatever, but
no, she actually, and this was taboo. She actually is the one that asked me out.
it's amazing.
Yeah, and it was like I couldn't believe it.
That was probably such a great thing for you to go through at that age.
Like even right now, as I'm talking about it, I can feel the happiness.
Oh, I'm
like,
sure.
Like 50 years later, I can still.
I mean, that changed your whole life.
Oh yeah.
Everything.
Oh yeah. Massive.
Well, also on the flip side, if you had continued to improve yourself, you would have certainly found other mates, but it's still like everything in your life changed that moment. You
Oh yeah.
got a whole new sense of identity and power and confidence and just your aura. I'm sure everything changed.
Oh my God, yeah, because I was going to university, which was 80 miles away. I would, like, the need to be there every weekend. I would take a bus or try and scrounge a ride of somebody to go from Waterloo to Toronto so I could see her. I worked really hard to save on a car so I would go, literally, I would take the bus 2.5 hours each way over the weekend and then do kind of my homework when I was in Toronto. or I would pack in all my work in college on Monday so that on Friday afternoon I could leave to go to Toronto to be with her. Oh yeah, it changed my life completely.
Give you a lot of perspective and context of everything in order.
Massive.
So transitioning now as we get close to like wrapping up, what do you've done so much. Obviously, you don't need to work to like put food on the table. You have your family that you could spend time with. You do work. You have a couple different funds, I think, and you're investing money. You're analyzing global macroeconomic conditions. You're looking at business opportunities. You're mentoring young people and their startups. You know, what do you think? So two-part question. Like, what is a good life, and what is and like, how do you find fulfillment? Like, what are your goals?
If we're wrapping up, I'll just give you the headlines, and maybe you can chat about it some other time, because those are two different questions, right? What's good life?
Well, to me, it's close, but maybe you see it as two completely different things.
Right. So, are you familiar with Jim Collins? He wrote the book.
He has several books. Good to Great, right?
Good to Great.
Yeah.
Right. I was having, I think, breakfast with him once, or lunch in Colorado. He had tenured himself, so he's got massive amounts of money from the royalties on his books. He left Stanford, and I was in my 40s then, I think. And he asked me, he says, so I'm like, at that point in time in my life, I was looking for a lot of validation. And so I was kind of almost bragging to him. I've done this and I've done that, and talking about myself.
Okay.
And he's listening to me very patiently. And then he asks me a question. Sounds like you have a good life. I go, well, yeah, I have a really good life. And he goes, but is it a great life? And I pause for a moment and I go, I don't think so. He goes, well, the biggest enemy of a great life is a good life. Because then you don't want to improve. So either have a great life or have a lousy life. Don't have a good life. So to me, a good life is a life that's worth living. And having reflected on it over the years, I would say there is nothing wrong with a good life.
Okay.
I thought there was something wrong with a good life when he spoke about it. And I think what he did was he took the connotation of great companies versus good companies, saying great companies out-earn good companies by 10x, so it's a good thing. So if you measure greatness versus goodness strictly on the monetary scale, there's a lot of truth to it. But having a good life in the human experience is probably a great life. So I get confused on that. So when people ask me, well, what kind of life do you have? I usually say a great life, and I'm not sure whether it's the vestiges of the conversation with Jim Collins that insist on me saying it's a great life rather than a good life.
But also, if you think you have a great life, don't you have a great life?
That's kind of
that's the point, right?
Yeah, that's the point. And then if somebody says, do you have a great life? And you go, yes, then if you feel the need to justify it, then do you really have a great life? Right? If you say, well, I have a great life because of A, B, C, D, E, then I clearly don't have a great life because I need validation from you to say, yeah, all those reasons.
I need to explain myself.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So it's, if you really have a great life and you say yes, then you're having a great life.
Right.
But if you give reasons why you're having a great life, then the question is, well, are you really having a great life? Are you getting validation from me? So that's kind of a like I said, it's more like something that we can spend more time in on another conversation. But just from a headlight perspective, good and great lives is kind of in this domain of self-definition. A fulfilled life is more a purpose-based life, a service-based life. So that's how I differentiate the two. Like, is there that ethic of service that you have? Now, and I've spoken to you over the years, you do have that service ethic. You do want to serve your fellow human being. Yeah, you're, they'll practice insurance, you're an ambulance chaser on one end, but on the other end, knowing you well, I know you're not an ambulance chaser. You do have that need to bring justice. It's your form of service.
I love serving. I love customer service. We've talked about that's my favorite.
And to me, service is a really important component in a fulfilled life.
Mm.
And therein lies the nuanced difference. Because I think at the end of the day, service to other human beings is the pinnacle of the human experience.
See, I agree wholeheartedly. As I went from that, oh my God, I made $500,000. What do I do? Like, why am I not happy? To becoming a father, building a business, doing all these other fun things, kind of going through what I felt like was a midlife crisis with my multiple back surgeries and pain medicine, and kind of just being like waking up and not having like a very clearly defined goal. I have found that having a challenge in front of you is, to me, super important to feeling like a good person. Waking up, having challenges that you can wake up every day, get to work, make some progress, do other, spend time with your family, serve people, serve yourself, serve your family, build things, and go and put your head down on the pillow at night and just be exhausted is, like, to me, that is the greatest feeling in the world. And when you don't have that, I think you quickly spiral into a very bad place. And that was what was happening to me for a period of time. And I righted the ship, but it made me realize the perspective, which is wake up and work hard, and you just feel amazing when you do that. But I think there's also a balance of not getting so far down the rabbit hole where you become like a true workaholic and you live to work. So I'm still kind of finding the balance. But
there's also the other side though, Brand. There are people who work really hard and they don't have our lifestyle.
Elaborate on where you're going with that.
I know a lot of people that work really hard.
Okay.
Have 2 and 3 jobs, look after families.
Right.
And they work their butts off.
And they're miserable?
But they just, society has ground them into the spot of minimum wages.
Okay.
And so hard work is
necessary, but if it's in the wrong direction, it can
but it's in the right
drive
direction.
You down.
That's what their skills are. Their skills are such that they can be either a cashier or, they're limited in their talents. Like, society is not rewarding them. But like a school teacher may work really hard.
Right.
Not earn that much money.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in a district where that doesn't protect through unions, or in a state where you're not, and you're doing really important work.
Right.
You're still part of the endangered class, right? And they work really hard. looking after 30
and they have and they're check to check as any of them.
So yeah, and they work as hard. They spend all that time looking after the kids.
Right.
Then they grade their homework at night.
Barely have to make dinner on a budget for the family.
Budget.
Yeah.
Then they have to prepare for the next day's class. and then they're teaching whatever 6 classes a day, so they've got homework from 6 classes.
Right.
They're working really hard, but they're barely scraping
But
by.
they probably don't think that they have a great life.
Yeah.
So it's not just hard work.
I'm saying hard work hard work is something that successful people say is a necessary ingredient for success.
Right.
I would argue that there are also people who don't work hard, who do have a great life, but at least they claim they do.
Right. I think that's a slippery slope.
Right. But that's your opinion, right?
Fair. That's what I experienced. An easy life with no hard work, it very quickly turned into something bad.
They're second. I know a lot of kids who are kids now, but they're in their 30s and 40s, second generation of wealth, third generation of wealth. You see a high degree of drug abuse. You see
very unhappy, depression.
Social,
yeah.
So I'm not smart enough to give you answers on that. But so to me, the headlines of a great life or a good life and a fulfilled life is kind of almost 3 things. First, you have to be fortunate enough to have the basics met. I think there's some luck associated with it, your lot in life and all that. So let's assume that first layer is met. Maslow's hierarchy. I've got the food.
Yep.
I've got the security, shelter, and so on and so forth. The second important component is validation. The more validation you need internally and or externally, I think the lower your quality of life is.
Makes sense.
Okay, so validation, I think, is a really important component in a fulfilled life or in a good or a great life. And the third area is, do you love and are you loved? And it's not, do I have 50 people I love and I'm loved by? That's not the formula. The formula is, am I spending most of my day around individuals that I love and am being loved?
Yeah. Is it a rewarding, fulfilling, like exchange?
Yeah, it's like the neurochemical reaction.
Yeah.
Like, this exchange right now that we've had is just experiencing this makes me happy.
Right.
And therefore I am loved and I love, right?
Right.
So it really is that simple. Like, I don't know how else to put it. It's like that simple.
It's like the feeling that I get when I've been at the office on a Saturday and I know my whole family's at the house waiting for me, and I get to just come home and like be around them and eat with them and like put NFL on, even though we don't watch it, and we just hang out together. And it's just like that feeling. It's hard to like even describe it, but it's just like, it's the best.
Yep.
Yeah.
It really is.
I think that's a great way to end it. I'm so appreciative that you came down here all the way from Philadelphia. I know you were here for other stuff, but we put this on the calendar last night. So, guys, Rudy Karsan, absolute legend. He's going to be back. I'm going to get him back. We're going to get some other topics, but, we're going to play this one back and listen to it. He's a very wise man, and he's been through so much, and just thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, man.
Yeah. Thanks for coming to the studio.
It's really cool.
One of the first guests. He was asking me other stuff before we went on the air about, what we're going to do. And, we're going to talk about that at some point, more offline and online, but, yeah, it's getting late, and, thank you so much for coming on.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.